In this video, together with my co-facilitator, we are going to discuss about the background of Philippine Constitution. To fully understand the background of Philippine Constitution, let's start with the definition of Constitution. Before knowing the definition of Constitution, these are the objectives of this video. First, to understand the meaning of the Constitution and its importance. Second, to be aware of how the Constitution plays a significant role in our country. And the third and last, to know the timeline of the evolution of the Constitution. Constitution is a set of fundamental rules that determine how a country or state is run. This is like a rulebook of political organization of government. All the rules that stated from that rulebook must be followed by the government. This document creates branches, powers, responsibilities of the government, and the rights of the people, and it's illegal for the government to violate this right. They will be punished by the law. The Constitution is often known as supreme law of land. It means it is the highest law in a country. The government cannot pass law which goes against the Constitution, and all law must comply with the principles set out in the Constitution. Here's the fun fact. Every February 2 is our Constitution Day. For every change of Constitution, the President will release a proclamation to commemorate the day when the new charter will take effect. This day called the Constitution Day. The latest Constitution was ratified on February 2, 1987. This is the reason we celebrate our Constitution Day in February 2. Now that we already know the meaning of Constitution, let's move on to the importance of Constitution. Why Constitution is important? First, it limits the power of the governments. We know that a government or a leader is very important because without it, the country will be in chaos. So why Constitution limits the power of the governments? These are the reasons. First, it protects us from having a government dictator. Second, it protects the right of all citizens. And last, it prevents the government from becoming a tyranny. Second, Constitution maintains the law and the order. And these are the reasons. First, to keep people safe. Second, to keep order in society. And the last one, protect the rights of individuals, the same as why Constitution limits the power of the governments. Third and last, Constitution imposes rules and regulations, and it serves as a guide to the government officials of what to do. Imagine a world without rules and regulation. What might be happen? For sure, the same as without government, the world or a country will be totally in chaos. So why Constitution impose rules and regulation? The main reason is to give protection to human rights, general public, revenue collection, consumer safety, and deter monopolization. These are the importance of Constitution.
Hello everyone, good day. This is Kizaya Luya, and I'll be discussing the first three constitutions of the Philippines. So first, we have the Malolos Constitution, second, the Commonwealth Government, and third, the Japanese government. So in our elementary days, we were taught that the Philippines were being ruled for 333 years. And for most Filipinos, achieving independence seemed like an impossible dream. Not until a turning point came with the Spanish-Filipino agreement known as the Pact of Yak-Dabato. The Spanish government agreed to grant self-rule to the Philippines in 3 years, only if Aguinaldo would go to exile and surrender his arms. Aguinaldo agreed into this idea. He went to Hong Kong. Nonetheless, this agreement was marred by a fundamental issue: mutual distrust between Filipino and Spaniards. The Spaniards failed to fulfill their financial commitments, and the Filipinos did not surrender their arms, ultimately rendering the agreement a failure. And this forced Emilio Aguinaldo to go back to the Philippines, and he declared the Philippine independence from Spain in June 12, 1898 at Kawit, Cavite. And the Filipinos were very happy with the idea of being independent. However, the joy was short-lived as the United States and Spain secretly negotiated the Treaty of Paris. The United States wanted the Philippines as a colony, so Spain sold Philippines to the United States. The Filipinos were not happy with the idea of being colonized, and this forced Aguinaldo to issue a decree forming a Malolos Congress, which was a committee who was assigned to make the constitution for the first Philippine Republic. And within just 3 days, the first Philippine Republic was established. The Malolos Constitution, or also called as the 1899 Constitution, or the first Constitution for the first Philippine Republic and the first Republican Constitution in Asia. And now, let's move on to the prominent features of the 1899 Constitution or the Malolos Constitution. So first, we have the introduction of a popular representative government, and second, the establishment of a unicameral legislature. This means that there is only one legislature called Assembly, and the Assembly had full control over the executive power. And note that the president was elected by the Assembly. So third, we have the acknowledgement of the separation of church and state. Fourth, the inclusion of a Bill of Rights. And lastly, we have the mandate for compulsory and free basic education. But unfortunately, this constitution, the Malolos Constitution, was never fully enforced due to the outbreak of the Philippine-American War. The war ended with the Philippines losing and becoming a colony of the United States. In the time of the United States influence in the Philippines, a new constitution was created in 1935. This constitution laid the groundwork for the Commonwealth government, which was a sort of temporary government before the Philippines gained full independence. Now, let's take a look at the main points of the 1935 Constitution or the Commonwealth government. So first, we have the bicameral legislature. This means that the government had two or made laws. So the first one is called Senate and the second one is called House of Representatives. So second main part, we have the President and Vice President's term. So the President and Vice President could stay in power for 4 years, but they couldn't be elected again for another term. So lastly, we have the voting rights. The right to vote was given to male citizens aged 21 or older. This right was also extended to women. Even if someone couldn't read and write, they still had the right to vote. So, note that the 1935 Constitution was not the first Constitution, but it was the first one to be fully implemented. However, this implementation was cut short due to the Japanese occupation in the Philippines during World War II, which came after the time when the United States was governing the country. In the 1943, the Japanese occupied the Philippines, marking the third time the country faced colonization, following the surrender of the Americans. During this occupation, the Japanese established their own government, known as the Japanese Republic. A new constitution was adopted in 1943 under the influence of Filipino collaborators known as the kapisanan ng paglilingkod ng bagong Pilipinas, or more commonly referred to as the Kalibaki. This became the basis for the constitution of the Japanese-sponsored Second Republic of the Philippines. Now, let's proceed to the key features of the 1942 Constitution or the Japanese government. We only have two. The first one is the enhanced executive powers. This means that the leader had strong authority in this government. And second and last, the unicameral National Assembly. The legislative body consisted of a single chamber, and only individuals who were against the United States were allowed to run for elections. However, it's essential to note that this constitution was only considered valid in areas controlled by the Japanese. The United States and the Philippine government in exile did not recognize its legitimacy. This constitution was short-lived because the Americans eventually liberated the Philippines from Japanese occupation. After a few years, the Philippines regained its independence on July 4, 1946, and the country returned to the 1935 Constitution. So the Vice President governed the Philippines according to the 1935 Constitution until President Ferdinand Marcos came to power. And that would be all for my topic for the first three constitutions. For the next three constitutions, I'll be giving the floor to my next co-facilitators. Thank you so much.
So hello everyone. So before we start our discussion properly, I will introduce myself first. I am Christine Ann A. Lovitos, one of the facilitators of the topic Background and Summary of the Philippine Constitution. So my topic I will be discussed to you is all about the 1973 Marcos administration, the 1986 Freedom Constitution, and the last is the 1987 Present Constitution. Marcos administration. The year 1973 marked a pivotal juncture in the Philippines' political history under the administration of President Ferdinand Marcos. So in 1965, Ferdinand Marcos was elected as the 10th President of the Philippines. He won against the incumbent President Diosdado Macapagal by a margin of 600,000 votes. His administration was known for its infrastructure projects and for its emphasis on the military and defense. Ferdinand Marcos was re-elected in 1969, becoming the first Philippine president to achieve this feat. His second term was marked by increasing civil unrest and opposition to his rule. Constitutional Convention began to meet in 1971. In 1971, the Constitutional Convention began to meet to rewrite the 1935 Constitution. However, the process was marred by allegations of bribery and corruption. On September 21, 1972, President Marcos declared martial law in the Philippines, citing threats of communist insurgency and purported assassination attempt on Defense Minister Juan Ponce Enrile. This marked the beginning of a period of authoritarian rule which lasted until 1981. He did this to influence the ongoing Constitutional Convention. As a result of the Constitution, it is aimed to in line with what President Marcos wanted. This was the 1973 Constitution. So what is 1973 Constitution? The 1973 Constitution, also known as the Marcos Constitution, was ratified by a controversial citizens' assembly's vote in January 1973. It replaced the 1935 Constitution and significantly increased the powers of the presidency. Now, here are the salient features of 1973 Constitution. First, it established in first time in Philippine history a parliamentary government with prime minister and a president. Second, legislative powers was vested in a unicameral National Assembly elected by the people. And third and the last is legalize all decrees, proclamations, orders of presidents, and there were various amendments in the 1973 Constitution, but the most controversial was the 1976 amendments. So here are the amendments of the 1976 Constitution. First, the National Assembly was replaced by the interim Batasang Pambansa. Second, the President would also become the Prime Minister and continue to exercise legislative powers until martial law was lifted. Now, Marcos thought that every day was in place until one of his enemy came back to the Philippines. This was Benigno Ninoy Aquino. Unfortunately for Ninoy, it was not a happy ending for him. He was assassinated on August 21, 1983 at the Manila International Airport upon his return from self-imposed exile in the United States. His death sparked outrage against President Ferdinand Marcos and led to widespread protests. So in response to mounting pressure, President Marcos called for a snap election in 1986. Despite the allegations of both rigging and electoral fraud, Marcos was initially declared the winner. However, the results were wildly disputed. The result was controversial that it forced the Filipino people to a historic uprising known as the EDSA People Power I. After Marcos was ousted, Cory Aquino became the president in the Philippines. She was the first female president in Asia. Her administration focused on restoring democratic institutions and healing the wounds of the Marcos era. Immediately after Cory Aquino became the president, she abolished the 1973 Constitution and replaced it with the 1986 Constitution, and also known as the Freedom Constitution. So what is Freedom Constitution? The Freedom Constitution was a temporary constitution promulgated by the Philippine President Corazon Aquino on March 25, 1986 after the EDSA Revolution. It restored civil liberties and dismantled the authoritarian structures set up during the Marcos regime. Now here are the salient features in the 1986 Constitution. First, it was a verbal copy of the 1973 Constitution minus the provisions on the Batasang Pambansa, because the Batasang Pambansa was completely abolished. Second, the country was in chaos after Marcos left, so Aquino vested in herself both executive and legislative powers, the same powers that President Marcos exercised under the 1973 Constitution. Third and last, it was just a transitional constitution that lasted for a year. Then after that, the constitution was created, which was the 1987 Philippine Constitution. So what is 1987 Philippine Constitution? This constitution reinstated the presidential form of government. So the 1987 Constitution, or also known as the Anti-Marcos Constitution, was ratified on February 2, 1987, during the term of President Corazon Aquino. This constitution was drafted in response to the abuses that took place during the Marcos regime and aimed to prevent similar occurrences in the future. The 1987 Philippine Constitution revolves around four themes. So first, upholding of national sovereignty. Second, democratic governance and prevention of another dictatorship. Third, respect for human rights and civil liberties. And fourth, promotion of social justice. So it's not a perfect document, but it is a country's highest law binding all the citizens of the Philippines. So the Constitution provided for three governmental powers. So these are the three branches of the government. First, the executive branch. Second, the legislative branch. And last is the judiciary branch. So let us discuss first the executive branch. So the executive branch of the government is responsible for implementing, enforcing, and administering the laws of a country. So the executive branch is headed by the president, who serves as both the head of state and the head of government. Legislative branch. The legislative branch of the Philippines is bicameral, composed of two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. So what is Senate? The Senate, or also known as the upper house, is composed of 24 senators elected at large by the qualified voters of the Philippines. Senators serve for a term of 6 years with a maximum of 2 consecutive terms. So, what is the House of Representatives? So, the House of Representatives, or the lower house, is composed of not more than 250 members. They are elected from legislative districts and through a party list system. Representative serves for a term of 3 years and can serve for a maximum of 3 consecutive terms. So we are here now in our last branch, the judicial branch. The judicial branch of the Philippines is the branch of government responsible for interpreting the law. It ensures that the laws enacted by the legislative branch and the actions taken by the executive branch are in accordance with the Constitution. The highest court in the judicial branch is the Supreme Court, which is composed of a Chief Justice and 14 Associate Justices. The Supreme Court has the power of judicial review, which allows it to declare a law, treaty, ordinance, or executive order unconstitutional. So the three branches that I discussed, it would not operate without the people. Same with the government. The powers of those three branches are separated from one another. This is what we call the separation of powers. So the separation of powers is a fundamental aspect of democratic governance. It also has a system of checks and balances. In this system, each branch has the power to check, to restrain, or to stop the actions by the branches. These lists prevent any one of them from becoming too powerful. So on the other hand, system of checks and balances are mechanisms put in place to prevent the abuse of power and maintain the balance among the three branches of the government. So this system of checks and balances ensure that no branch of government becomes too dominant and that power is distributed and exercised responsibly. So that would be the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
In our world, some people comprehend and know their rights as citizens of their own country, but others do not or do not have enough knowledge to know their rights. Understanding the Constitution will open every person's eyes when it comes to corrupt politicians and unjust practices that try to undermine the Constitution in its interest. Understanding the importance of the Constitution will help us understand and protect our rights, respect the rights of others, and safeguard democracy and the rights of ourselves in our nation. That would be all. By the way, I am Charlene L. Milicia. Thanks for watching.